January 9th, 1943, room 3327, the New Yorker Hotel, Manhattan. The maid knocks twice. Standard procedure, she gets nothing back but silence and the faint smell of something old, paper, and the cold. Nikola Tesla is dead. He is 86 years old. The man who figured out how to move electricity across a continent is lying alone in a hotel room that smells of pigeon seed and cold tea. The tab is unpaid. There's no family here. Nobody came, but here's what most history books skip straight past. Within 48 hours before his own nephew could board a plane from Yugoslavia. Before the ink was dry on his death certificate, agents from the U.S. Office of Alien Property arrived at that room. They went through every drawer, every notebook, every loose page, and they took it all, every document, gone, classified, sealed. And the man the government sent to review those documents, his name was John G. Trump, an MIT physicist, a respected scientist, the uncle of a future president of the United States. What was in those papers, and why has the official explanation never quite held up? To understand why the government cared so much about an old man's notebooks, you have to go back. Way back, not to 1943, but to 1884. The year a 28-year-old Serbian walked off a ship at Castle Garden, New York, with 4 cents in his pocket, a poem he'd written on the crossing, and a letter of introduction to Thomas Edison. Edison read the letter. Then he looked at Tesla. Then he reportedly said, "I have had many hard workers. This is a damn good man." They were opposites in almost every way that mattered. Edison worked by brute force, hire 100 men, run 10,000 experiments. Find what works by elimination. Tesla worked inside his head. He'd visualize an entire machine, rotating parts, tolerances, stress points, and run it in his mind for weeks before he ever picked up a pencil. When he finally drew it, it worked. The first time, almost always. He wasn't exaggerating when he said this. His colleagues watched it happen. It unnerved them. But here's what's worth understanding about the world Tesla was born into. Electricity in the 1880s wasn't a utility, it was a battlefield. Edison had built his entire business empire on direct current DC power, the kind that flows in one direction, steady and predictable. His model required a power station every mile, which meant infrastructure, which meant investment, which meant profit tied to physical geography, controllable, scalable, fundable. Tesla walked into that world with an idea that threatened to append all of it. Alternating current AC power could travel hundreds of miles on a single wire. You didn't need a station every mile. You needed almost nothing compared to what Edison had built. It was cheaper, faster, and more powerful. Edison understood this immediately, which is exactly why he spent the next decade trying to kill it. But the war of currents is only the beginning of this story. Because Tesla wasn't just thinking about power lines. He was thinking about something that made the power lines themselves obsolete. By 1893, Tesla had won. Not in a courtroom. Not in the press. On the ground, in the dirt, at Niagara Falls. The contract to harness one of the most powerful natural forces on the North American continent was awarded to the Westinghouse Corporation using Tesla's AC system over Edison's competing bid. On November 16, 1896, the switch was thrown. 250 miles away, In Buffalo, streetlights came on for the first time. The crowd had no idea whose equations had made it possible, but the engineers did. Lord Kelvin, the physicist who had publicly backed Edison, who had called AC power dangerous, stood before Tesla's generators and reversed himself on the record. He had been wrong. That was a big admission from a man who didn't make them often. Tesla should have been wealthy beyond calculation. He wasn't. He'd torn up his royalty contract with Westinghouse years earlier, during a financial crisis, because he believed Westinghouse had treated him fairly and he wouldn't let a fair man go under over a contract. It was a gesture so staggeringly generous, or, depending on how you look at it, so staggeringly naive, that it still takes a moment to fully register it. He signed away what would eventually have been worth billions, because he thought it was the right thing to do, and he never seemed to regret it. Which is either the mark of extraordinary character or extraordinary blindness, and I'm honestly not sure the two are mutually exclusive. But Tesla wasn't done. He was only getting started, and what he was planning next made the AC power system look like a warm-up act. Sharem, Long Island, 1901. Tesla breaks ground on what he calls the World Wireless System. The tower is 187 feet tall. The steel shaft driven into the earth beneath it goes down another 120 feet into the water table to use the earth itself as a conductor. His vision, stated plainly, without apology to anyone who would listen, was this: transmit electrical power wirelessly to every point on the globe, free for everyone. No wires, no meters, no bills. Think about what that means. Not just communication. He had already demonstrated wireless radio transmission years before Marconi. Something we'll come back to. He meant power. The thing that runs your lights, your machines, your city. Transmitted through the atmosphere and the earth itself. Received by anyone with the right equipment, anywhere on the planet. The man financing the tower was J. Pierpont Morgan, the most powerful banker in America, possibly the most powerful financier in the world. Morgan asked one question that Tesla apparently could not adequately answer. 6 words. The question that killed the future. Where can I put the meter? You can't charge for something that's free. You can't build an empire on something you can't control. Morgan's money didn't come with altruistic strings attached. It came with the expectation of a return, and a system designed to give electricity away to everyone on Earth had no mechanism for that return. None. The funding stopped. Not with a confrontation, not with a dramatic falling out. It just stopped. Letters went unanswered. The accounts ran dry. The construction crew showed up one morning and found no payroll waiting. Tesla spent years trying to revive the project. He never did, and then the government blew it up. 1917. The United States has entered the First World War. The Navy, concerned that the tower could be used by German spies to transmit signals to U-boats, orders it demolished with dynamite. The creditors needed the scrap metal anyway. The site Tesla had mortgaged his entire future on was reduced to rubble worth a few $1,000s. He was 61 years old. And here's what doesn't get said enough about that period. Tesla didn't stop. He kept working. He moved between hotels, the St. Regis, the Waldorf Astoria, eventually the New Yorker. Running up bills he couldn't pay, designing machines nobody would fund, writing papers nobody would publish. The obsessive neatness of his living quarters. Everything had to be divisible by 3. He couldn't bear round objects near him. He required 18 cloth napkins at every meal, was less eccentricity and more a man maintaining order in the only domain still under his control. By the 1930s, he was surviving largely on the charity of Westinghouse, which had agreed to pay him a monthly stipend. He was feeding pigeons from his hotel window, having long conversations with a white female bird he described with a tenderness that made visitors visibly uncomfortable. And then, in 1934, he called a press conference. He was 78 years old. He announced he had invented a weapon, a focused beam of charged particles, capable of destroying 10,000 aircraft at a range of 250 miles. Enough to make invasion impossible, enough to end all war. The papers called it the death ray. They said it gently, the way you describe the claims of someone you've decided to feel sorry for. A brilliant man gone to seed. Sad, really. The FBI filed a request to obtain his papers the moment he died. That's not the behavior of an institution that thinks it's dealing with a crackpot. January 7th, 1943. Tesla dies in his sleep. January 9th, 2 days later. The Office of Alien Property, a wartime agency with broad powers to seize assets, belonging to foreign nationals, sends agents to the New Yorker hotel. Tesla had been a naturalized American citizen since 1891. It didn't matter. They took everything, every paper, every notebook, every diagram, every personal letter. John G. Trump received the call from the FBI shortly after. He was 36 years old, a rising physicist at MIT, already building a reputation in high-voltage research. He spent 3 days reviewing the seized materials. His official report, when declassified decades later, concluded that the documents contained nothing of immediate scientific importance, nothing that hadn't already been published or surpassed. The documents were classified anyway. Read that sentence again. A government reviewer concludes the papers contain nothing important, and the government classifies them for 60 years. There are 2 ways to interpret that gap: the charitable reading, bureaucratic inertia, wartime procedures applied automatically, continued through momentum, never revisited. It happens. Institutions do things without reasons, and then defend the absence of a reason with the presence of a stamp. The less charitable reading, Trump's review missed something, or was told to miss something, or found something and accurately reported that it was nothing, and the people above him didn't agree. What we know for certain is this. By the 1960s, both the United States and the Soviet Union were actively researching directed energy weapons, focused particle beams, designed to destroy aircraft and missiles at long range. The physics underlying that research is, in its essential structure, identical to what Tesla had described in hotel room press conferences, that the newspapers called "sad the Soviets." According to intelligence reports declassified in the 1990s, had obtained copies of Tesla's papers through channels that are still not fully transparent. They had a head start. Whether that head start came from Tesla's work specifically or from parallel research, that question remains open. Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars, as it was called, included particle beam weapon research as a core component. This was 1983, but 49 years after a frail old man in the New Yorker hotel told reporters he'd already solved the problem, and they patted him on the head and went back to their editors. And then there's radio. Guglielmo Marconi won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1909 for the invention of wireless radio transmission. The US Supreme Court ruled in 1943, the year Tesla died, possibly the same month that Marconi's patents were built directly on prior work by Tesla. The Nobel Committee was not notified. The prize was not revised. It still carries Marconi's name. Tesla never knew the court had ruled in his favor. He was already dead. He built the modern world. He died before the modern world bothered to tell him. There's a thing that happens to certain kinds of minds. The world catches up to them, eventually. The math turns out to be right. The ideas turn out to be sound. The patents get vindicated in courtrooms the inventor will never sit in. But the world catches up on its own schedule, not his. Tesla's AC system powers every home in America. His radio principles are in your phone. The fundamental concepts behind wireless power transmission are right now being tested by engineers who would struggle to say his name without stumbling slightly on the weight of what they owe him. And his particle beam weapon research sits in declassified files at the National Archives. In College Park, Maryland, you can request them. Some people have. The files are dense, technical, and deeply strange. A very old man writing with complete precision about technologies that would not be built for another 50 years. John G. Trump, in his later years, became a distinguished scientist in his own right. He built some of the most powerful particle accelerators of the mid-20th century. He never gave a public interview about the 3 days he spent reviewing Tesla's papers in 1943. His nephew became the 45th and 47th President of the United States. Whether any of that is connected to anything is a question the historical record currently cannot answer, which is itself, perhaps, the most Tesla thing about it. Because here is the thought worth sitting with. When powerful institutions classify information, the official explanation is always national security. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes a classified document really is dangerous, and the person holding the stamp is genuinely protecting something. But sometimes, not always, not even most of the time, but sometimes what gets classified isn't a weapon or a secret, it's an inconvenience. A set of ideas that, if they became widely known and widely pursued, might complicate the profitable arrangements that already exist. Free wireless power doesn't just threaten a business model. It threatens the entire architecture of who owes what to whom, which is to say, it threatens everything. Tesla died broke in that room. The patents that bear his name underpin technologies worth trillions of dollars. The man who lit the world couldn't keep his lights on, and the files they took from his room, the ones they classified for 60 years. Some of them are public now. Most of them are If you want to see the documents they sealed for 60 years, subscribe. Because this is only the first file.